family.
That's great. There are a few of those in the automotive world.
The good news is I think most.
You're probably right about that. Yeah.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. How many dealerships do they have?
You got to check it out. Go to Riker.com and look at their nearly 70-acre mega mall. It's an incredible operation.
All right. Now we're up
All
on
right.
the Facce books.
Uh-oh. Yeah, that is an incredible lot. That's right. They got their own. Do they have their own test track or something, or is that just the? That's probably just interstate.
They did. It's an amazing thing to see the dedication they have to the community, to their people, and how they just go bold in everything they do. Their vision for where commercial and fleet was going led them to build one of the biggest fleet service centers in the country. I mean, it looks like
I've heard
an
about
Amazon warehouse, and it's full.
That's awesome.
It's full right now.
Always been a good mentor, and I'm glad he was willing to write the foreword. He had one of the toughest jobs, I think, in the industry, not only making sure the dealership and the family could keep the wheels on the bus, which he did an exceptional job with, but as NADA chairman, he had his work handed to him.
Yeah, I bet. I'm going to get one of those Genesis. What are you driving, Jeremy?
You know, I'm in a Range Rover Sport now, but I'm moving to the Ford Bronco.
Nice.
I think that car is going to be awesome.
It looks sweet.
Yeah, the full size one, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had my eyes on
it's a shame you're living in poverty there. All right. Welcome, everybody.
Welcome, Alex. Yes. Welcome, Jeremy.
Thank you for having me.
I think we've established that Jeremy's doing all right.
When's your Ford come in? Bronco?
I don't know. Hopefully later in the year.
All right, but you do have it ordered up.
Yeah, I was one of the early ones on the list.
Nice.
My grandmother worked for Ford, so I think it will be I haven't had one in a long time. I think it'll be super cool.
Well, speaking of your grandmother, history. Give us a little bit of history on Jeremy Anspach and how you got into the automotive industry.
Detroit born, I'll say car guy through and through. I remember around the age of kindergarten, the teacher would go around like second day of class, what do you want to be when you grow up? And you hear fireman, astronaut, police officer. And I said car dealer. And her response was, is your dad a dealer? But she didn't ask the other kids, is your mom or dad an astronaut, right? So she singled me out. And I always fell in love with the automobile at a very young age. My dad has a 1967 Corvette, big block, side pipes, and I think it absolutely influenced me. It was probably one of the only tangible things that I was really attracted to. It was just this excitement of dad uncovering the car and him starting it and the smell of the basically exhaust, right? And being a Detroit guy, my father was big into like Woodward and racing, and that was a thing in the 60s. So muscle cars meant a lot. It was more than just a status symbol or an automobile. It was like a part of his soul almost. And I always had good memories in it. So I felt like if I love cars, nothing better than striving to be a car dealer where you have a lot of them and you're involved in the business. So I was always gravitating towards it. As I went into college, I was in the e-commerce business, and it was selling motorcycle parts. And when I got out of that business, I learned a lot about e-com early on. This is early 2000s. And back then, you remember, like, dealer specialties had to twist people's arms to get them to go from no photos to one photo, or from one photo to the 9 photo pack, right? And think like the days when Auto Trader had a premium offering to get you 27 pictures. So that was around the time I saw an opportunity. If I could apply what I learned in e-com, which was far more competitive, but we were using paid search and all the other digital channels as our exclusive way of getting a customer onto the website and ultimately to transact, I could help dealers thrive. And that's what it started with. In 2005 or 6, I got into a service merchandising business. I saw an opportunity. There was so much muscle memory being deployed by service advisors. Jeff, you bring in your vehicle, they see it has 30,000 miles. They tell you need an oil change because they didn't realize in the DMS you had one 2 weeks ago and you needed a tire rotation. So they were selling off a lot of muscle. And back then it really wasn't that easy to see past history for you. Mm-hmm. So Servit was a business to take kind of the dirty data from service opcodes and show you as the consumer customer facing screen and give data to the service advisor to match what you need with what he's recommending. And the net result was more dollars per service repair order and customer pay and higher satisfaction. I sold the business to a private equity group, and I'll admit it was an interesting run. I always felt like if service is the number one profit center, it should get a lot of general managers' attention. And back then it didn't. Wrong. That's right. And I figured if I was going to do one more thing, it was try to help dealers win with taking what they did in reconditioning and putting it on their used VDPs, which did not exist prior to me founding PureCars and launching the Value Report back in 2009. And from there, it was kind of the fun success story. We had incredible growth, 100% plus year over year, and went from no dealers to hundreds of dealers to thousands of dealers. And that took us to 2012 when I saw this opportunity that it felt like there was a lot of waste in digital advertising. It was still this minority ad spend share of the overall dealer's ad spend. And ads seemed like they were newspaper ads put digitally. There was very little relevant content in the ad, very little synchronization, et cetera. So we launched smart advertising to do that, and the rest is history.
Well, I don't know if the rest is history.
Last thing. So
like
since
you got
then,
a new chapter rolling now.
Exactly. We just launched this won't be about PureCars, but we just launched a new offering called Pro Dealer. And really the thesis is digital advertising and marketing tech in general is not getting easier. So it's more and more critical to have insights and show relevant information in a way that it can actually be consumed and become something that can be used to make better decisions. We saw a big gap in the market with that. So that's what we've been focused on the last year and a half or so.
Very awesome.
When did you
I'll
sell
never
PureCars? And that was an acquisition, correct?
That was what, 2015? To Raycom?
We sold October of 15 to Raycom. Great company. They saw TV dollars shifting in auto as the whole industry did. And they surveyed all of the digital ad providers in automotive, or at least I'll say the ones that their survey had on them. And we ranked at the top. So they reached out, and that led to the transaction. It was eye-opening for me. I learned a lot about traditional, which I never studied since I was focused on the digital side. We stayed as a standalone business unit. And then about 3.5 years later, I would have never expected this, but Raycom was acquired out of Atlanta by Gray Television. It was a multi-billion-dollar deal. And as a result, we spun out and are back to private equity backed. And I came back from chairman into CEO March of 2020.
That's cool.
That's a fun road there.
It's
I know there are a few founders who would sure love to have their companies back after
I bet.
similar journeys.
well, it's
Yeah.
been a lot of fun, and it's been a real blessing to be back in the CEO seat. I think for us, for me personally, anything I can do to help this industry thrive motivates me. That's why I'm back. And when you look at the power of the franchise dealer, I think they can be the disruptor and not be disrupted. And that's something maybe we'll talk more about on the show.
Jeremy, I remember the first time we met, which actually didn't start off on a good foot because I think your rep, his name was Zach, right?
That's right.
I think he was in the Bel Air, Maryland area. And for whatever reason, I didn't know who PureCars were. I kept thinking it was TrueCar. And someone kept calling. Of course, it was Zach, kept calling the dealership, trying to get in, have an appointment. And I just got so sick and tired of him calling me. I'm like, dude, I'm not signing up with TrueCar. And he goes, TrueCar? We're not TrueCar because we're PureCar. Of course, every in this industry, every business either has the word car or dealership in it or dealer. And so you finally locked in an appointment with me and we sat down. And that's, of course, when you introduced the PureCar value reports. And it was funny because it only took about 15 to 20 minutes and the light bulb screwed in. I was like, all right, I like this. I also just felt bad for treating Zach so bad for several months and dodging all of his phone calls.
Well, it was a conversation I remember like yesterday. And the scary part is that was over a decade ago.
I know. Yeah, it was at Frederick Nissan. Yeah, too funny.
And Jeff, what did you think of TrueCar then?
Apparently not too positive. Yeah. That was funny. I was thinking about that earlier today before we jumped on. But at that time, you had introduced, and I guess that was basically your main product at the time, were the PureCar value reports. And I sort of used that in the subject line for the email blast to get the Refresh Friday word out there. Was subject line was, do you remember the PureCar value reports? Because when you showed those to me, I really liked those. And I really thought at one point you guys were going to give Carfax a run for the money. I believe in our conversation you had discussed, that's at that time, that's sort of where you wanted to head with the product. But man, our dealerships really utilized the PureCar value reports. And then from there, I went to Mile One and got you guys signed up with all the dealerships at Mile One. And it was such a great tool. Yeah. I tell you, if you reintroduced them, I'd probably jump back on them.
It still exists, and there's dealers around the country.
No, it does.
Still using it. It's evolved into what we'll call a value intelligence suite. So it's bundling a lot of the things, and I think we're on version 8 or 9 now. It's evolved over the years, but foundationally, there is an important need for a dealer to allow the consumer to quickly consume the information they want. And the value report was always to showcase key value, option, and reconditioning attributes. And it amazes me, 11 and a half years after we started with the value report, that
no one's really replicated it.
No one has replicated it at scale. And I know of no one else who's been able to take the messy opcodes and automate it in a way where you can graphically display it in a relevant fashion without needing to click on the back end or do other things that other tools have tried. And we all know things that need usage generally don't last long.
Yeah. We're using a product called Auto iPacket, which does a pretty good job. But it's more about just the information of the vehicle. It's not as pretty when it comes down to displaying
Aren't
the
they
vehicle.
only capable of handling Mercedes?
They've got select manufacturers that they do better with. Yeah. And Mercedes being one of them, because I believe the owner came from a Benz dealership. But
You
the
know, I
way
think
PureCars would
fundamentally,
just highlight all the different items, what was hot, at the time, let's just say sunroof or Bluetooth or multimedia package. You guys had such a great way of highlighting those items. And you and I worked together on two other projects around that. And of course, that was um, the comment generator, which
that's
to this
right.
day, I still think you had the best comment generator out there. Um, what was actually we worked on three projects because we worked on the trade-in piece because at that time that I was with AutoHook, Hook Logic, and we worked on the trade-in piece to incentivize people based on the trade. I
That's
forgot
right.
all about that. Yeah, and there was something else that you and I sat and worked on together. Or I helped out. I forget what it was though. Yeah, so it's you guys have. So what made you at some point? I don't want to say go away from the value reports because you just stated that you still have several dealerships that use them. But what I don't know. I'm just curious. What changed where you start going in a different direction?
Yeah, we've taken the stance all along that if we have a really strong data warehouse that can structure information better than the raw format, you can make it a value. Our first use case was value report. Then we saw that we couldn't get the value report on listing sites like AutoTrader and Cars.com. So our way of helping the dealer thrive for the consumer who was looking from a listing site was through smart comments. We were able to automate comments and kind of pull these things in. And it was late 2012 when I kept seeing more and more share of ad budget going to digital, and there was just a ton of media waste. It was inefficient. So
There still
when we
is.
pivoted, it wasn't a new data warehouse we spun up thinking we were going to sunset value intelligence. It still exists today, and it's still used by a lot of stores, and it still does, Jeff, what you liked back then. But what I will say is, in any business, you have to focus on what does the market think of you as best in class. And we absolutely have, for the last 8+ years, been in the marketing tech world. And we've continued to add channels. So we started with search. Smart comments played into that. We wanted to have ads that were highly relevant, that did more than just throw in a quantity on hand or maybe a starting price. We then went into display, our way of graphically representing things from a value report and understanding hierarchy allowed us to what we believe was best in class advertising on the display, retargeting, etc. Since then, we've moved into video and OTT and Facebook and Insta. So we've continued to focus on it, but the core concept, or I'll say core discipline of taking data from all these messy sources and making it more relevant and then using it to eliminate ad waste has been our core focus. Once we win the click for the dealer, it's still incredibly relevant to showcase to that consumer what they're looking for. It still amazes me that we're in 2021 and there were not many blessings that came from the pandemic, but this transformation is accelerating as dealers need to focus more on digital. And we're seeing more share of wallet towards digital. We saw digital retailing tools get utilized both from signups and from the consumer engaging it on a dealer website at record high rates. But this concept of relevancy needs to run through the car buying experience, just as it does for us when we're on Amazon or Apple or any other major consumer brand or consumer website for that matter that we buy from.
And the ad
Agreed.
waste certainly hasn't gone away since 2012. If anything, it might have gotten worse.
That's what I'm thinking. Well, as dealerships get fat and happy, they just keep adding different ad sources. And,
Well,
that's one thing. Go ahead, Alex.
I was going to say, going off of or piggybacking what you were saying, Jeremy, about some of the changes that have come since COVID. You hear stories about dealers obviously cutting back on their ad budgets because they're lacking vehicles, but then at the same time, you have the agencies who are going out saying, "Well, let's just move the budget over here instead of putting them on cars," which you might be able to put in that wasteful category in some cases. How
Yeah,
much of the dealership name can you buy?
It's been very interesting. So we, for some of our brands, unfortunately, saw them come off of the pandemic lows with record profits. We see many brands being hit very hard from this chip shortage. And if you drive down any auto mile, you'll see plenty of holes on the new car side. So as a result of this, we all know used car prices are booming, and low supply of new cars isn't helping that cause, since a lot of that demand is now moving to near new pre-owned. I think all that said, we've seen a huge acceleration in two areas: marketing used cars more aggressively. And the reason for that is dealers don't want to be in the situation where the tide lowers, prices drop, and they're stuck. So they want to turn these used cars near instantaneously, and they're willing to invest to do it. And the investment is still exceptionally low if you think about it as an ad cost per unit sold. And then the second area, which it really wasn't till chip shortage to see dealers at scale thinking this way, but it's about trade. How do I get more vehicles so I have a competitive advantage? And I'll comment that we've seen disruptors, we all know who they are, be exceptionally aggressive. One of them in particular has advertising that we saw during the Super Bowl, which made the hair on the back of my neck stand up, because my best friends and the people I love are in this business. And I look in any market, franchise dealers are the ultimate entrepreneurs. They're the ultimate philanthropists. They're good to their staff. Like, it's, to me, it feels more sick than anything. But I look at disruption, and we see Apple. Apple has retail stores, and they have an exceptional online experience. And I think when you look at the disruptors, their vehicle acquisitions are made from two areas: auction or digital advertising, or traditional for that matter, but it's advertising. The franchise dealer can do that. But on top of that, they have service customers. So think equity mining. They have lease turn-ins. They have new car customers that therefore have leases, which come back in. And they have a physical presence. And in any metro market, there's hundreds of thousands of people passing these dealers over a month. There is some flow where people go, you know what? I'm sick of this car, and they turn right. So I think the franchise dealer has all the potential to win in customer acquisition over the disruptors. Where the franchise dealer has been behind, and it's really due to blind spots, is in this merchandising area. The disruptors have had better photos, been more quote unquote transparent. Meanwhile, they're still retailers, right? They're not this third party valuing their vehicles. And we're seeing more and more dealers take it serious. And I would say the top percentile of franchise retail stores are starting to compete in a way that I think will become the disruptor of the disruptors.
Well, I hope you're right about that. I mean, when you look at some of the disruptors, you have to wonder, it's like, it was the lack of dealerships doing what they should have been doing that actually allowed that to happen. Because as you pointed out, we've got all the advantages. So why do they even exist? And it's really nothing more than a message, because half of those disruptors, they have no showroom presence. They don't have an in-person buying process. And if they do, it's horrible, because if you read the reviews of half of them, I mean, with particular ones out there, you can't even test drive the vehicle. Yeah, you get the nice 30-day return policy and all that good stuff, but still, it's not the same as actually being able to jump in a car and test it out before you buy it.
And one thing I'll add to that is, when you go in a vintage car, you immediately go, that's cool. And one of the reasons you think it's cool is its simplicity. I mean, there were a lot of cars that didn't even have a clock. So when you think of the future of the automobile, one thing I will say on a recorded session like this is that automobile is not getting simpler. Electrification may change how the service drive functions, but it is not making it easier for buyers that have for the decades had combustion engines. The amount of autonomy that is being added to these vehicles, and the amount of just overall digital complexity is mind-boggling. I had someone mention to me, and it really stuck. They said, "Did you know a new Ford F-150 has more computing power than a Boeing 747?" And
I
when
believe
you
that.
pause and think about it, what does that mean? It means that I believe there will be more and more anxiety for a consumer to want a vehicle delivered to their door when there isn't a staple retail center around the corner that can be the equivalent of the Genius Bar for an Apple store. And I really see franchise dealers morphing more and more into the way Apple has done it on a global scale. The consumer should be able to consume all the information they want in the most relevant way digitally. If they want to hit the buy button, they should have the right to hit the buy button. But in some cases, they do their research and then they go in to walk out with those headphones or with that MacBook Pro. In some cases, it's the opposite. They do their research in the store, they sleep on it, and then they order it online. I see no reason why the franchise dealer won't be that in a short period of time, and there's already tech out there to allow them to do it. And the quicker they get there, I think the disruptors are going to have massive headwind.
I like the idea of a dealership having sort of like a Genius Bar. I mean, I guess the service department would sort of be like that, but as things become more complicated, which they are, I mean, I sit in a new Mercedes Benz with the new inbox system, and it's, it's like when you buy a piece of software or translate that over to a car dealership CRM. Most dealerships only use about 10 to 20% of the capabilities.
Right.
That's got to be the case for some of these newer vehicles. Consumers don't even know half of the items or half the different features that the vehicles have because there's just so much, there's good luck trying to get a customer to sit down with. I mean, in order to do a full delivery and go through all these different items or different tech pieces of technology, you could easily spend 2 or 3 hours with a customer.
And we see a lot of dealers that are spending multiple hours at delivery to maximize their CSI scores, et cetera. And as vehicles get more and more complex, that time's not going to go down. It's only going to go up. So feedback I've had is that when folks I know have dealt with the disruptors and this vehicle is dropped off, they're getting this almost truck leaving anxiety. They don't feel that they have that connection where before you leave the dealer's lot, you can make sure your spouse's Bluetooth is paired. So now they're spending all this time online figuring out how to do it. And that's one example. And I believe as the vehicle becomes more and more complex, you'll see those list of examples will accelerate, allowing the dealer to win this. I think the industry can continue to thrive. There's a place for franchise dealers indefinitely. There's a place for dealer rooftops indefinitely. And it's all about improving the experience and almost providing radical hospitality because they have every piece to win it. And now I think this is the time they need to accelerate to do it before they lose market share.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
So while you're throwing out predictions, go a little further and you think about the some of the dealerships in the traditional sense that might not be thinking this way and thinking of how can I provide a better product experience for somebody who already owns a vehicle. You think, we've got some comments going on, and Ryan Evertson's talking about Lithia in their driveway project. You've got Sonic and Echo Park, some of these larger groups, and these are also groups that are buying up dealerships as it seems like as fast as they can. Obviously, you've got another level that's going on here where you've got some dealers who are coming out of COVID and saying, "Man, this isn't fun anymore. Just what can I sell this for?" Especially as it's at peak value right now, or what may seem that way. So, when I was at Cox, we always threw around that there were about 16,000-ish franchise stores, and they're owned by about 12,000 owners. So what we're going to see is that ownership getting less and less and less as more of these big dealer groups come in and buy them up. And And I think you'll start to see where they'll put more attention into scaling out an experience like what Jeremy's talking about, and being able to hit on some of these merchandising levels and things that you've mentioned as well. I see you're
So I think
chomping at the bit to say something, so I'm gonna let you do it.
in all industries, you see consolidation occurs. It's been that way for hundreds of years. You're absolutely right. We're seeing consolidation occurring. I saw a good slide from NADA, and it kind of broke down dealer owners that own between 1 and 5 rooftops. I think it was 6 to 15 and 15 to 50 and 50 to 80, et cetera. And you could see as they predicted over the next 3 to 5 years where there'll be the most ebb and flow. The top publics, or I'll say those that have, I believe it was over 80 rooftops or 100, I don't recall it off of memory, but let's just call them the big names. We all know who they are. They go from 0.1% to 0.3. So they're growing. They're absolutely growing. Lithia is on a great acquisition. Asbury made an incredible acquisition. And they have the resources and the ability to focus on making sure they are the disruptor moving forward. The most consolidation has been occurring and will continue to occur from the dealer principal that owns 5 or less rooftops. And part of this is the average age of a dealer principal that may not have a succession plan, and they're being acquired by the 6 to 50 store rooftop owner, which is where most of the growth is occurring. But I think it's critical, and it's been a passion of ours, is we want to make sure that any dealer, whether you're a top public or you're a single rooftop owner, you should be able to have all of the tech at your fingertips in an easy way to digest and an easy way to execute a compelling solution in the MarTech side so you can compete. Carvana may, or anyone for that matter, they may have different advertising, they may have a totally different business model, but there's no reason why a franchise dealer should not say they're best in class in the dig ad side. They should not say they're best in class in how they display content on their website, and then ultimately how they execute the experience. And right now we see there's blind spots in the whole chain, and hopefully the momentum of the disruptors and the digital transformation that we've seen in this quote unquote new normal coming out of COVID is here to stay. And it just continues to get bigger and bigger at a very rapid rate.
Yep.
Speaking of blind spots, I guess during your time of this last year and a half, COVID, apparently you had time to write a new book.
Yes. It's pre-order on Amazon. If Jeff, feel free to give people my info if anyone would like a copy who's watching this live, and we get to ask for a copy. I'll make sure as a viewer to this, you will get one. It was a very, very stressful time watching the world go through the pandemic, watching our friends and family and colleagues all suffer in one way or another from it. But one thing that happened was I had less travel, right? There was almost no travel. So when I had time, normally I'd be in the air, and now I was able to really focus on what did we learn and what are common blind spots. And automotive waste on the digital ad side is been here to stay. And how do we turn this into a guide that will help any dealer who reads it absolutely circle more than one takeaway that, if executed, will further improve their profitability? That was the focus. Publisher was kind of loved the storyline, and we ultimately published it. It will be public on Amazon, I think, the end of the month. So by July 1, your books would be in your inbox. Again, for anyone seeing this live, let us know, and I'll make sure we send you a copy.
Yeah, we'll post it over in the forums underneath today's show for sure. So, you sort of touched on it, but what prompted you to go through and write the book and touch on maybe some of these blind spots?
Yeah, it really seemed like when you have a 60-minute session at NADA or any other trade show, you can get a lot of concepts out. But I've always found books that I read more than once, and it's really difficult to implement everything at once. So the thought here was to have a very tangible, executable game plan for dealers. The book being called Blind Spots, we focus on what are common blind spots. We see muscle memory. We all have it. We have it in the way we work out. We have it in the way we behave. We have it in the way we act professionally. And there's a lot of muscle memory in digital advertising and just total execution on the dealership level. Some is great. Some can be improved. We see a lot of correlation from the top performers that budgets are a huge component to a dealership. But if you look at the best retailers in the country, they're really thinking about it differently. They're ultimately saying spend as much as it takes until you hit a threshold, as long as your ad cost per unit sold on that particular product gives you the profit you need. Keep spending until the supply chain breaks. And what that's, I could keep going on these, but there's a lot of key valuable things that we see that we've been privileged to work with several thousand dealers. And in that, a subset of the truly passionate, move the needle every day group. And that group is pulling away from the rest of the pack. So the purpose of the book is give dealers tangible, actionable things to make sure they continue to reduce ad waste.
I took notice in one of the chapters, or maybe it was one of the blind spots, you touch on vendor churn. Elaborate a little bit on that for me.
So I've been on both sides. Back from the consulting days, I was helping dealers pick vendors, and as a vendor, we win deals, and any great company still has churn. Vendor churn is complicated. In the digital advertising space, simple things like what is my cost per lead is not standardized. We see vendors that what they would consider a lead is different for one than another. Things like duplication, things like phone calls. Was the phone call answered? Was it answered for greater than 15 seconds, less than 15 seconds, et cetera? So we find that oftentimes dealers that won't look in the mirror and identify blind spots, oftentimes will just create this vendor churn cycle. And the net result is the next guy starting from ground zero takes a lot of time as that vendor to build history, to know what works and doesn't work. And when you look at kind of best in class dealer groups, best in class dealers, or best in class retailers, they do not churn their vendors nearly as quickly as we've historically seen in auto. So that's there's a whole section within the first chapter around blind spots that talks about it, and I think it's a valuable area.
Yeah, that one stuck out to me. I was like, all right, because I just got the book this morning. I want to dive into that one, but I'm sure it's going to confirm a lot of the things that I've been saying myself for quite a few years. And just working with so many dealerships to see that, just the fact that they will jump from vendor to vendor to vendor, hoping that they're going to get a different result. And it's like, you're going to get the same result 9 times out of 10.
It's the definition of insanity right there.
Yes, it is.
There are times you need to switch vendors because one has too much waste, or one doesn't give you the appropriate reporting that's actionable, or their customer experience group is a disaster. Like there is a reason to churn, but you need to identify the reason and have high conviction that the risk you're taking and the distraction you're taking will likely result in additional upside. And we find that thought process oftentimes is lacking. And I'm not positioning this at PureCars. This is more just what we see in our data on vendors that are churning from all different parts of the business. It makes it very, very complicated when you think about historic data to current. Am I improving or not? As you're churning vendors, that data is really lost in a macro way. So it's a critical piece.
What do you think?
2 comments in a row where they're talking about the OEMs forcing churn. So you got Ryan Everson touching on that,
for
and
sure.
Alan Cooper hitting it too, and that's obviously a tougher one to talk through.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've taken a big focus to it. We're in 15 of the OEM programs, so we see kind of massive value as a provider to dealers at scale to be in them. I think from experience, you'll generally see the more established, kind of bigger brands in these programs, but they're always evolving and changing. So I respect that.
That's
I
an
would,
answer
I
from a
would,
guy who's in 15 programs. So, yeah, I mean, obviously, and I can read between the lines because I've heard Alan and Ryan in the past on this one. They're definitely frustrated with that kind of thing.
Understood.
Yep. So, Jeff, I cut you off pretty hard there.
yeah, and I forgot what I was going to say. That's all right. So more in the book, I think I took notice to where you have, well, you touch on, what is it, customer lifetime value, of course. But one of the other ones was the cost per sale strategy. And I know that's one thing that I've always really focused on. What is our cost per sale? And, at least on my side of the desk, it's more around marketing. So I've got my different, I've got my goals where I want to be on a cost per sale per vehicle sold. And I can only control, what's on this side of the desk. Past that, that's their job. But how important is that cost per sale strategy?
Incredibly important. I mean, it's the ultimate outcome of what we hope marketing does. And we see dealers that will bite hard on a certain KPI. I'll just say cost per click. And, when you go back to vendor switching, vendor B comes in and says, oh, I can beat Jeff at this. I can lower CPC. And if that's the KPI that you're focused on, you go, all right, I'll give you a store, go give this a try. Well, when you actually step back and think about it, and this isn't a blind spot. If I look at every dollar spent, let's just use paid search as one channel because it's easy to follow in this regard. And let's say your average CPC is $4. So a vendor comes in and says, oh, I can lower it. I can have an average of 3. All they need to do is stop bidding on every keyword over $3. And guess what? You now have a $3 or less average. And we see blind spots around with print, for example. A used car manager or a new car manager or a GM or dealer principal would see a proof. They would market what they wanted to market, that they hoped the newspaper would stimulate eyeballs for. And if those eyeballs came into the dealership, they had those things to sell. My point where this is the dealer had control of that. Well, in the digital advertising world, in some channels, marketing an F-150 may be more expensive than marketing a Focus. Why? Because there may be more margin per unit in that. Therefore, people are willing to spend more. So we could spend a lot of time on this. This is a key focus in one area in the book, that if you drive your attention to ad cost per unit sold and ad cost per repair order, you really can quickly identify muscle memories that oftentimes steer you wrong in the allocation of ad spend to certain channels. And if you don't have insights that can show you data by ad cost per unit sold, you're missing, I would say, one of the most, if not the most important layer of info to make informed decisions from thereafter.
It's good to know, because that's what I've been pretty much basing most of my decisions on for the past 15 years.
I was going to say, when I met you, you were talking about ad cost per unit sold.
Yeah. Yep. That's, we get inundated with reports out of the CRM and different software programs where, so much data comes across the desk. It's just like, what am I going to do with all this? Like there's data, then there's information. I want information. I want to be able to track the trends. But, even within all that, it would always come back to where was I at cost per sale and how is that going to affect the outcome of my decision?
So we've had a pretty extensive focus group for the last almost 2 years. And when I came back as CEO, one of the things I said is, we're a big business. We use data and try to transform it into relevant information. We need to do that with our dealer body and really understand their pain points. And Jeff, what you just said was one of the top pain points our dealers all shared with us, which is it's overly complicated, way too many reports. You're seeing data in a form that you can't make reliable decisions from. Turn it into insights that are valuable and customize those insights the way I want to consume it so I can be more efficient in my information decision-making side of things. And secondly, I want to be able to hold PureCars more accountable and other vendors more accountable by consuming things in a standardized way.
Exactly.
Yeah, standardized way.
There is nothing standard in the automotive industry.
It's funny. I'm still thinking of examples of different technologies I used over the years that, going back to what you were saying earlier, Jeremy, about what's a lead. And immediately, like one of them came to mind was Cobalt, considering everybody who clicked on a map to be a lead. What can I do with that? How do I sell that a car?
Yeah, but we sent you 100 people clicked on your maps.
Yep. I mean, I get the value in it, and it's an indication of somebody getting ready to be a floor up, and there's something there. But they did bubble that one up pretty high on the on the KPIs that they thought we should care about.
Were there any other metrics that, as you were writing the book, that you decided to really highlight? Was there any other metrics that really matter or should be mattering to dealerships that maybe they're not paying attention to?
There's a lot of things we covered in the book that I'm confident dealers that read it will find really valuable. Fixed budget is an area we're seeing the most progressive dealers and progressive retailers in the country break away from. When I was in e-commerce 15 plus years ago, my father, who's a CPA, asked, so what's your ad budget? I said, I don't have one. I'm willing to spend up to X dollars per part as long as I have the appropriate profit. And it allowed me to scale until I ran out of supply. And as a small business, that was somewhat frequent. Dealers have had this mentality of a fixed budget and they viewed it as an expense. We're seeing the most progressive dealers flipping that and turning it into an investment that they're willing to make in a more fluid way. It could be based on age. It could be based on dealer cash. It could be based on overall profitability, right? Some other KPIs that I think are highly valuable that are oftentimes missed in an absolute blind spot is, Alex, with the success you've had in your business, any investor will say, what's your lifetime value? And if your customer acquisition cost is higher than your lifetime value, it's kind of difficult. We see the car business as this tangible retailer that delivers you a vehicle, but its mission thereafter is to service that customer and then have a better probability of buying that vehicle back and hopefully a slightly less competitive environment than an auction. And this is a very powerful flywheel because it absolutely gives the franchise dealer an incredible advantage over the disruptors. And it's something that if you step back and look at it, if dealers focus on lifetime value, they're making more of the value post-sale than the sale. So when you start thinking about where to market or who is the right audience to attract for your dig ad side of the world, thinking and bringing in lifetime value into the equation is game changing. And this is a concept that we see best in class dealers doing, and we spend a lot of time in the book talking about it. I have a real example I'll share. A friend was looking at buying a vehicle, and it was a new BMW. And he gets a quote from the local dealer, and it was approximately retail. He gets a quote from a dealer 80 miles south, and he gets $4,000 off. What does he do? He drives 80 miles. That dealership sold him a vehicle for $4,000 off, reduced their margin on a vehicle that wasn't aging. They just wanted the unit obviously sold. But they knew if they had the data and thought about lifetime value, that customer has a near 0% chance of servicing with them.
Coming back. Yep.
They should not have done that deal. They should have done that deal to the guy 2 miles south that has a 95% probability of servicing and having a far higher lifetime value than the guy 80 miles north. And this is a concept that is used in all industries. And the customer acquisition cost to lifetime value ratio is game changing when you think about it and you really focus your advertising efforts around how do I maximize not only the sale, but the post sale. And it becomes a very, very powerful flywheel. And if you look at a lot of market leaders, the ones that are always on the boards for being number one, as that flywheel starts to spin, it gets faster and faster. And then that dealer wins the click more often because their brand is so much more well known. And it gives them almost what I'll call an unfair competitive advantage, but it's one that we hope all dealers think about, identify the blind spot, and ultimately fix.
I've witnessed many dealerships actually offer a cheaper price to the consumer that's over an hour away than the consumer that's in their backyard. I'm thinking, what sense does that make?
And for us, being able to see service data, which is where we started life, which allowed us to build the value report the way we talked about it over a decade ago, gives us great insights around where are your service customers by make, by model, by age group, et cetera. And as you keep slicing it this way, it's just one more valuable insight that can help you better focus your ad spend in the area that will not only sell the vehicle, but also give you the service revenue.
Is there a best practice or a way to get started in keeping track of lifetime value for some of our listeners today who might not be doing it?
Yeah, just get Jeremy's new book.
So you know, DMSs and CRMs oftentimes have a way to see a customer's lifetime value. I think the easiest way to start thinking about it, I'll say in the least sophisticated way, but it will provide value, is if you're a Chevy dealer, look at your service customers by zip and by kind of heat map by quantity, and then break that down by model. And you may or may not see a change on the model level, but sometimes you do. For example, a full-size truck buyer may have different behavior than a subcompact car and live in different area. But once you have that, you should then overlay it with your advertising and ask yourself, am I marketing in the areas that have the highest chance of not only buying, but servicing? And if the answer is yes, pat yourself on the back and keep thinking that way. If your answer is maybe, really push yourself to get the insights to be able to define if you are or you are not. And if you're not, fix it.
There's, I mean, the data's there. I was just sitting here thinking, I know we use eLead CRM and there's a lifetime value tab, and I often check it. There's also right on the first screen, there's also, it'll show you the quick purchases, which really doesn't give you much with the value of the customer other than the fact that you can see that they purchased maybe 2 or 3 vehicles, depending upon what the cost is. But they do have, you know, a lifetime value from purchases, you know, broken down by purchasing gross. Obviously the DMS has to have that, but I've never seen like how there's got to be a way of getting that information in front of, you know, in front of the dealership or in front of the sales manager right away. And yeah, be able to overlap that with your marketing reports to really come to a solid number on what makes the most sense here.
Well, can I throw out
it,
some of the challenge on the back of what
Alex,
you were
why don't
just
you
saying?
throw out some of the challenges around that?
I will. So it goes back to something Jeremy said earlier as well, is the churn factor. So a lot of the time, the lifetime value in the CRM system is mostly as good as you've been on, as long as you've been on that system.
Exactly.
Now they can do a historical pull with the DMS companies. Sometimes those require a charge, and the DMS companies will only allow you to go back 7 years. Some might be 3. Some might be like, well, here's an arm and a leg charge for you to go back 15 years if we even have that. So trying to get that complete picture can be a challenge, especially if you're running through CRMs every 2 to 3 years. So,
Alex,
Yeah.
incredibly well said. I think another area when you think about lifetime value is part of the historical challenge is dealers have different comp plans for variable ops and fixed ops managers. And it almost is in the same building, but there's no connection unless you're the general manager or dealer principal. So oftentimes it's all about just sell that vehicle. Well, we even see a major disconnect with F&I. One thing that still boggles my mind is that the vast majority of customers dealers have a payment. Yet they market on their digital advertising and on their website a price. That means your focus
you're
is the
speaking my
minority
language
amount
now.
of traffic. It's not for the majority. And when you think about the best retailers, I assure you that if Amazon knew that their products were financed, or I'll just say have a payment, and that is the driver of the decision as it relates to the finance question for the customer, they would be promoting payment early in the process. We see digital retailing tools seem to fail at times and have lower kind of click-through and completion rate because you don't really get a near penny perfect payment until you're telling them you want to check out. It seems counterintuitive. We feel that you should be showing payment very early in the process and making it very simple and straightforward for the customer. And the result of doing that is you'll get more customers down in through the funnel and ultimately convert them. And we saw some data that shows that the customer that engages a payment tool early has more total gross for the dealer than the customer who doesn't. So it's not counterintuitive to profitability. In fact, it boosts profitability. So it's one more blind spot. We talk about it in the book. I think it's of high value for dealers to think about.
By the way, I just got a text from Bryce Englert over at Trade Pending saying that I must have paid you to say this.
I can attest he didn't, but he was definitely speaking Alex's language. That's great. Well, Jeremy, I tell you, it's always a pleasure, and it's great catching up with you. Looking forward to reading the book. Real quick, again, if someone wants to get a hold of this, or can they purchase this, or are you?
Yep, if you go on Amazon, you can pre-order it. My commitment is anyone live on the broadcast. If you guys email me, just jeremy@purecars.com and say, put in the title you want a book, I'll send it to marketing. Put in your address, I'll make sure we send it to your house. If you're watching this after it's live, Amazon, you can pre-order.
Excellent. Well, that's a nice deal for sure. I've got a slew of books for the automotive industry written by so many people, and I usually get about 3/4 of the way through them, or maybe a quarter of the way through. There's only a few that I've actually sat down and read all the way through, but I can already see this will probably be one of those for sure.
Well, I appreciate the compliment, and follow up with me when you finish the last page.
No, will do.
Thank you, Jeremy. It looks like UPS has delivered mine to the house, but I'm at the office. So.
All right.
Yeah, thanks
Well,
for getting
Alex
that
and
out to
Jeff,
us
I
so
want to
soon.
thank you guys both. It's been an absolute pleasure to be on the show.
You got it, Jeremy. Thanks again.
Take care.